You should not miss these breathtaking historical photos. Write in the comments which photo you like the most. A Japanese Kate torpedo bomber drifts in the Pacific after a United States Navy PB-4Y caught it from above on June 22, 1944. The pale ring around the plane makes the wreck look staged, but it is a real trace of air combat, far from any runway. James Gillingham made custom leather prosthetics in England in the late 1800s using molded limbs, braces, straps, and fitted boots. His work was unusually advanced for the Victorian period because each device was built for one person's body, not as a simple standard part. Saipan Beach, June 16, 1944. Damaged LVT landing vehicles sit in the surf one day after the first landings. This island mattered because its airfields later put Japan within range of long-distance American bombers. This is one adult's weekly British ration in 1942. 1 egg, 2 ounces of tea, 8 ounces of sugar, and small portions of bacon, cheese, fat, and meat. The ration system began in 1940 to share food during shortages, so families stretched meals with bread, potatoes, gardens, and powdered egg. Nangarhar, 1988. An Afghan resistance member poses with captured Soviet gear, including a helmet, radio headset, chest rig, and field case. By this time, the Soviet presence in Afghanistan was in its final year, and captured equipment had become a key source of supplies in remote areas. Padley, around 1950. An Inuk mother holds her child in a remote Arctic community that depended heavily on caribou for food, clothing, and tools. When the caribou migration shifted, the community faced a severe food crisis that exposed how fragile life was far from supply routes. Freddie Mercury stayed close to Mary Austin after their relationship ended, and he later left her his London home and a large part of his estate. Her most guarded role came after his death, when she privately carried out his burial wishes and kept the location from the public. Basoko, early 1900s. These Congolese men were photographed inside a Congo Free State prison under King Leopold II's private rule. The printed caption accused them of a taboo crime, but the image also served colonial propaganda during one of Africa's most exploited rubber regimes. Panay, March 6, 1945. Sergeant Rodriguez of the 160th Infantry watches a Japanese soldier step out with his rifle held above his head. This small patrol scene shows how the Philippines campaign was fought village by village long after the main landings were over. El Michili, January 1941. Italian bersaglieri inspect British equipment left across the desert, with packs, boxes, and trucks scattered in the sand. In North Africa, captured fuel, water cans, and vehicle parts could matter as much as fresh troops, because supply lines stretched for hundreds of miles. London, 1979. Jeremy Thorpe leaves court with his wife after being cleared in one of Britain's strangest political trials. The case involved Norman Scott, a hidden relationship, a failed plan, and a Great Dane named Rinka, ending Thorpe's political career. Afghanistan, 1988. Mujahideen fighters sit on a disabled Soviet tank during the final year of the Soviet campaign. A vehicle built for open battle became a roadside prize in a mountain war where small groups often outlasted heavy armor. This early 1900s photo shows Rosa Leon, a Spanish-American stage performer known for half-and-half costumes and hula dancing. Her publicity was unusual for the period because she used female pronouns and openly described attraction to both women and men. Margaret George Shello was an Iraqi-Assyrian woman remembered as the first female Peshmerga, joining the Kurdish movement in the early 1960s after first working in medical support. Her studio portraits spread widely because they showed a woman leading men in a role almost closed to women in that region at the time. Stockholm, 1906. A man opens the Codex Gigas, the largest surviving medieval manuscript, about 92 centimeters tall. Made in Bohemia in the early 13th century, it became famous for one huge painted figure that gave it the name Devil's Bible. Iran, 1970s. Young women pose in Western-style clothes during the last years of the Pahlavi era. After the 1979 revolution, public dress rules changed sharply, making photos like this a visual marker of a lost social period. Hamburg, 1962. A young Liverpool band sits with an American rock and roll pioneer whose voice and stage style shaped their early sound. Their German club years turned them from unknown musicians into a tight live act just before worldwide fame. Hong Kong, May 21, 1989. Cantopop star Anita Mui wears a headband reading "Support Beijing Students" during a public rally on Hennessy Road. Her appearance mattered because she was one of Asia's biggest entertainers, using her fame in open support of the student movement. Germany, 1937. Adolf Hitler accepts a Christmas gift at a staged event, surrounded by party symbols and press cameras. The photo shows how the regime used ordinary holiday scenes to make political power look normal to the public. British Columbia, 1942. Japanese-Canadian men read an official notice after Canada ordered people of Japanese ancestry away from the Pacific coast. More than 20,000 were sent inland, and many lost homes, boats, and businesses, while most were Canadian citizens. London, 1940. St. Paul's Cathedral sits under looping aircraft trails made by a long exposure camera during the Blitz. The photo turns a night air battle into a map of movement above the city's most watched dome. Hakodate, July 1945. USS Essex aircraft, including TBM Avengers and SB-2C Helldivers, release bombs in a tight carrier formation. The target was northern Japan's port and shipping network, hit only weeks before the war ended. Dieval, June 22, 1918. British motorcycle crews prepare sidecar-mounted Vickers teams near the Western Front. These units were built for fast movement, giving infantry mobile fire support before tanks and armored cars became common. New York, 1929. A worker sits on the steel frame of the Chrysler Building while its 77 floors rise above Manhattan. The tower became the world's tallest building for a short time and remains one of the most famous Art Deco skyscrapers ever built. Northern Italy, probably 1944. Women of the 10th MAS Female Auxiliary Service stand in uniform before a wartime gathering. After Italy split in 1943, this naval unit served the Italian Social Republic, and its women handled support roles such as messages, nursing, and administration. In 1961, Andy Warhol bought Campbell's soup cans before turning the same grocery label into 32 pop art paintings. At the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles, each canvas cost $100, while real cans nearby sold for $3 for $1. London Zoo, 1940. A sailor feeds a porcupine while staff kept caring for animals during the Blitz. Some visitors and soldiers still came in, making the zoo a strange pocket of normal life in wartime London. Algeria, 1960. French Army photographer Marc Garanger took identity portraits of Algerian women after they were ordered to remove their face coverings. Garanger later published the series as a record of colonial control, and the women's direct stare became the strongest part of the images. Australia, 1978. Cinematographer David Egby films Mad Max from a motorcycle sidecar to keep the camera close to the road. The film had a tiny budget, so its speed came from real vehicles, tight camera work, and practical stunt filming. Belfast, 1972. A firefighter sprays water as a burning building comes apart during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The photo is famous because the wall is falling mid-frame, showing how fast street fires could turn into citywide damage. World War I, around 1915 to 1918. A trained German service dog brings food containers to soldiers posted near a trench. Dogs like this also carried notes, small supplies, and first aid items through routes where people were too easy to spot. Chicago, 1968. Activists David Dellinger and Jerry Rubin present a pig named Pegasus as a satirical presidential candidate in Grant Park. The stunt mocked American politics during the Democratic National Convention and became one of the strangest protest images of the decade. Italy, 1917. An Italian woman helps British soldiers prepare turkeys for a Christmas meal behind the lines. The scene shows Army food work at ground level, where holiday dinner still meant boiling water, hand-plucking birds, and shared local help. Italy, 1917. British soldiers and a local woman prepare turkeys by hand for Christmas dinner near the front. Even a holiday meal in World War I meant field fires, shared labor, and food prepared in open courtyards. Paris, June, 1941. A man sits in a cafe during a heat wave with a stack of saucers marking how many drinks he has ordered. French cafes often use saucers as a simple bill counter, so the pile shows the heat better than any thermometer. Dutch East Indies, 1939. Oxen pull a heavy sugarcane cart toward a colonial-era factory. Fresh cane had to reach the mill quickly after cutting because its sugar content began dropping soon after harvest. California, 1937. A Missouri family of 5 sits beside a packed car on U.S. Route 99 with no money, a sick baby, and car trouble. The photo shows Dust Bowl migration at its most direct, when whole families carried their home on one failing vehicle. This French woman became the oldest verified person in history, reaching 122 years and 164 days in 1997. As a teenager in Arles, she met Vincent van Gogh in her uncle's shop and later remembered him as rude, badly dressed, and smelling of alcohol. London, 1930s. A boy on roller skates holds onto his dog to gain speed along a wet city road. The blur shows how fast the ride was long before skate parks, safety gear, and child street rules became common. United States around 1930. Officials drained seized beer barrels during Prohibition when making and selling alcohol was banned nationwide. Scenes like this were public proof of enforcement, even as illegal bars and secret supply networks kept the trade alive. England, mid-20th century. Beauty contest judges score women in swimsuits while their faces are hidden behind numbered masks. The masks were meant to remove identity from the contest, turning the event into a strange public test of body measurements and posture. United States, early 20th century. Contestants sit on tall poles for a high chair endurance contest while attendants pass food and newspapers from below. These stunt contests were cheap public entertainment, testing balance, patience, and crowd attention more than real athletic skill. Mick Meaney, age 33, prepares for an underground endurance stunt inside a sealed wooden box. He later stayed below ground for 61 days, turning a barroom publicity stunt into a record built on air tubes, nerves, and public attention. Arkhangelsk, May 9, 1945. Canteen workers roll a beer barrel into the street after Germany surrendered. The city had been a key Arctic supply port, so this small celebration came after years of convoys, shortages, and blackouts. Germany, 1945. British officers stand beside an 800mm shell and charge case from the German Dora railway gun. The round was taller than a man, and the gun that fired it was one of the largest artillery pieces ever used in war. Ruatahuna, New Zealand, 1932. Missionary Annie Henry sits with Sister Isabel and members of the Tuho community, including Chief Tauhera in the center. Several people wear traditional Maori cloaks, making this a rare photo of local leadership, family life, and mission contact in a remote North Island village. Iraq, 1988. Iraqi soldiers pose around a marked wall portrait of Ayatollah Khomeini during the final year of the Iran-Iraq War. For them, the damaged mural was not just a picture, but a captured propaganda symbol from their main enemy. Spain, 1936. Anita Garbine raises a clenched fist under a CNTF-AI flag during the first months of the Spanish Civil War. Her image became famous because it showed a young anarchist militiawoman as a public symbol of revolution, not just a background supporter. Bikini Atoll, March 1954. Castle Bravo released 15 megatons, far more power than United States planners expected. The test spread radioactive fallout over nearby islands and became one of the clearest warnings of the nuclear age. Chesapeake Bay, 1943. A fleet air arm. Grumman Avenger drops nose first into the water after losing control near the British escort carrier Ravager. The photo was taken seconds before impact, making it a rare record of how dangerous carrier training could be even far from the front. Before the internet, people sometimes removed others from personal photos by scratching out faces, cutting prints, or marking negatives by hand. The damage often tells a second story, showing that someone was not only absent from life, but deliberately erased from the record. Idaho, June 5, 1976. The Teton Dam gives way as water cuts through the new earthen wall near Rexburg. The dam had been completed only months earlier, and its failure sent a fast flood across farms, towns, and the Snake River Plain. Hollywood, California, 1975. A young mother holds her baby in a small room with an American flag covering the wall behind them. The child would later become one of cinema's most recognizable actors, making this quiet family photo unusually early and rare. Tsushima, 1905. The Russian cruiser Aurora shows visible shell damage after receiving 18 medium and small caliber hits in battle. The ship survived the defeat, later reached Manila for internment, and eventually became one of Russia's most famous museum ships. Constantinople, 1923. Russian white exiles sit in a bare room after thousands fled the Civil War and the collapse of the White Armies. The city became a waiting zone where former officers, officials, and families survived by selling belongings or taking any work they could find. Batumi, Georgian Soviet Republic, 1942. Soviet trainees practiced bayonet drills using fencing masks, padded jackets, and rifles with training tips. The photo shows how older hand-to-hand methods were still taught during World War II, even in an age of tanks and aircraft. South of Honshu, March 19, 1945. USS Essex and USS Indianapolis come under air attack as a Japanese Zero falls into the sea ahead of the carrier. The black bursts across the sky show dense anti-aircraft fire and how close enemy planes reached the task force near Japan. Moldavia, likely 1944. An Orthodox priest makes the sign of the cross as Red Army soldiers pass in formation. The image is unusual because Soviet rule was officially anti-religious, yet wartime need brought church rituals back into public view. Leningrad Naval Hospital, World War II. Nurse Anna Yushkevich feeds injured sailor V.A. Ukov from a Soviet patrol ship. The photo shows hospital care during the siege period, when naval crews, doctors, and nurses worked under extreme shortage conditions. Afghanistan, 1987. Soviet combat engineers detonate a discovered roadside explosive behind an armored vehicle. Route clearing was one of the war's most dangerous jobs because hidden mines could stop or destroy an entire convoy. Egypt, 1946. Children crowd around glass Coca-Cola bottles as the American drink became a new public curiosity after World War II. For many, the strong fizz and sweet taste were unusual enough to turn one shared bottle into a street event. Tibet, 1920. Photographer John Noel captured women wearing large, looped hair frames used to hold braids, ornaments, and cloth. This headwear was not just fashion because it could show local identity, family tradition, and status in one visible detail. Königsberg, 1932. A Soviet Tupolev. ANT 9-passenger aircraft stands in Deruluft markings, the joint Soviet-German airline that linked both countries by air. The photo shows an early European air route when passengers crossed borders in metal aircraft while crews worked on wet open airfields. Paris, August 1944. French resistance fighters and police escort a German officer past the opera as civilians crowd the street. The scene captures the city's liberation at street level, where armed locals, police, and public celebration mixed in one fast-moving moment. Petrograd, August 2, 1914. Crowds gather on Palace Square waiting for Nicholas II to announce Russia's entry into World War I. The signs praise Slavic unity, showing how public excitement appeared before the long conflict changed the empire forever. Manston, Kent, August 2, 1943. The crew of B-26C Marauder Miss Emily poses after returning with heavy damage around the nose section. The holes show how close medium bomber crews could come to losing the aircraft and still reach an English airfield. Bosnia, early 20th century. Gavrilo Princip's parents stand outside their rural stone house, far from the politics that later made their family name known worldwide. Their son's act in Sarajevo in 1914 helped trigger World War I, but this photo shows the poor village background he came from. Canary Islands, 1994. The former ocean liner American Star ran aground after a tow line failed during bad weather. Once built as a luxury liner, it became one of the world's most famous shipwrecks as the Atlantic slowly broke it apart. Sarajevo, 1994. The Olympic Zetra Stadium grounds became an emergency cemetery during the siege, with Bosniak, Croat, and Serb graves in the same snow-covered field. The place built for the 1984 Winter Olympics turned into one of the clearest symbols of how quickly a modern city was broken by war. Budapest, 1956. A young Hungarian revolutionary stands with a rifle on a damaged street during the uprising against Soviet control. The photo is striking because his face looks calm and exhausted, showing how quickly ordinary teenagers were drawn into a national crisis. Sachsenhausen, February, 1941. Thousands of prisoners stand in ordered rows during roll call at the camp near Oranienburg. The wall slogans about truthfulness and sacrifice were part of official propaganda, placed above people held under one of the strictest camp systems in Germany. Sachsenhausen, February, 1941. Thousands of prisoners are lined up for roll call beneath slogans reading truthfulness and sacrifice. Those words were official propaganda, while the real purpose of the formation was control, counting, and discipline for hours in the open. Sachsenhausen, February, 1941. Prisoners stand in huge roll call blocks under slogans about truthfulness and self-sacrifice. The sharp rows were not a parade, but a daily control system built to count every person and break any sense of private life. Helena, Arkansas, 1941. King Biscuit Time brought live Delta blues onto local radio with Sonny Boy Williamson and other musicians in the studio. The show became one of America's longest-running radio programs, turning a flower sponsor into a major name in blues history. Maryland, January 23, 1926. The state's only female justice of the peace sits with armed officers during Prohibition enforcement. Her office targeted illegal liquor sellers and gambling rooms, making this photo look more like a crime squad portrait than a courtroom scene. Hoover Dam, 1936. The Colorado River is released through the new giant structure after years of dangerous work inside Black Canyon. The blast of spray shows the scale of the dam, which turned desert river control into one of America's biggest engineering symbols. This portrait is often linked to a woman born in 1748, which would place her childhood before the American Revolution. Taken around 1852, it shows how early photography captured people whose lives began more than a century before cameras became common. Emmett County, Iowa, 1936. A farm woman churns butter by hand in her kitchen during the Great Depression. Before home refrigerators were common, fresh cream was worked into butter at home, making this small machine part of daily farm survival. Côte d'Ivoire, 1968. Members of the Kufulo community take part in a funeral ceremony with drums, masks, and horned headpieces. The image shows how music, movement, and symbolic dress marked major life events in local tradition. Amur Railway, around 1910, convict exiles stand in line under guard at a work camp in the Russian Far East. Their labor helped build a strategic route linking Siberia to the Pacific, turning punishment into imperial infrastructure. Chicago, 1912. Workers sit on timber platforms inside a huge sewer tunnel with picks, pipes, and broken clay piled below. This was hidden city building, the underground sanitation work that let crowded streets and tall buildings keep expanding. Chengdu, 1966. A young Red Guard member raises a rifle during a mass rally against United States involvement in Vietnam. The banner and raised arms show how Cultural Revolution politics turned public squares into carefully staged displays of youth loyalty and anti-American messaging. Shakishi, Seminole, Oklahoma, 1939. A truck driver sits at home with his mother and young son in a small room with a calendar and a large radio set. The radio was likely one of the family's most valuable items, bringing news, music, and outside voices into a plain Depression-era home. Seminole, Oklahoma, 1939. A truck driver sits at home with his mother and young son in a small room with a calendar and a large radio set. The radio was likely one of the family's most valuable items, bringing news, music, and outside voices into a plain Depression-era home. Soviet Union, 1987. Cosmonauts practiced sea recovery in a capsule before missions to the Mir orbital station. Mir had launched 1 year earlier and later grew into a modular space station that stayed in orbit for 15 years. At the first state bearing plant in Moscow, artist Sergei Grigoriev paints honored blacksmith Panteleimon Shemyakin directly inside the forge shop. The setup shows Soviet factory culture turning skilled industrial labor into official portrait art, with pipes, metal rings, and machinery kept in the frame. St. Petersburg, around 1895 to 1913. An early racing cyclist poses with a light road bicycle and medals covering his chest. The medals show how popular track and road cycling had become before cars took over city speed culture. China, January 1967. Red Guards pose with detained men during the Cultural Revolution when student groups were mobilized to police ideology in public. Street checks, public denunciations, and Mao quotation books became daily tools of political control across cities and schools. Reims, France, 1916. A schoolboy walks with a protective mask while the city lived under World War I bombardment. Children still went to class in a frontline city where school books, helmets, and air warnings could belong to the same morning. Soviet Russia, early 1920s. An American Relief Administration food package contained flour, rice, sugar, cooking fat, tea, and canned milk. During the major food crisis, these parcels became a foreign lifeline sent through a program organized under Herbert Hoover. This photo shows Adolf Hitler with early party associates, including Julius Schreck, a bodyguard and chauffeur who looked similar enough to fuel later double rumors. The claim that Schreck secretly replaced him is not proven, but the resemblance made this old image a lasting source of conspiracy stories. Kamchatka, 1945. Avachinsky volcano sends a thick ash cloud above the snow-covered slopes near a settlement. The photo shows one of the Pacific Ring of Fire's active volcanoes where people lived close to sudden eruptions and heavy ashfall. North Africa, 1942. A Bedouin couple stands with dromedaries beside a German Messerschmitt Bf 110 on a desert airfield. The photo sharply contrasts older desert transport with modern wartime aviation in the same frame. Berlin, 1989. West Berliners crowd the wall while East German border guards stand in a line at the Brandenburg Gate. The scene captures the final days of a divided city, when a sealed border became a public meeting point almost overnight. Near Radziecchow, June 25, 1941. Soviet K-5-2 and T-34 tanks from the 4th Mechanized Corps are stuck in a drainage ditch. The photo shows how early Soviet armor could be lost to terrain, poor recovery, and broken coordination before combat even began. Manhattan, March 25, 1911. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire tore through crowded upper floors where many workers were young immigrant women. The disaster claimed 146 lives and pushed New York toward stronger workplace safety laws. 1920s fashion briefly turned women's knees into tiny canvases after shorter skirts and rolled stockings made them visible. Some painted hearts, faces, initials, or jokes there, turning a small exposed detail into a bold flapper-era statement. Lisbon, April 25, 1974. A Portuguese soldier lies in the street during the Carnation Revolution. The near-bloodless military uprising ended decades of dictatorship and helped close Portugal's colonial empire. Rio de Janeiro, 1999. Felix Baumgartner made a 29-meter base jump from the hand of Christ the Redeemer. It became famous as one of the lowest recorded base jumps, with almost no time for the parachute to open. Germany, April 5, 1932. Adolf Hitler speaks during an election campaign stop with microphones and cameras placed close to the stage. The photo shows how modern media helped turn political rallies into mass propaganda before his rise to power. Volga region, 1921. Doctors examined severely undernourished children inside an American medical relief train. The train was part of foreign aid during the Russian food crisis, when clinics, kitchens, and supply routes became lifelines. San Francisco, 1906. Police patrol streets after the earthquake, and fires left large parts of the city in ruins. Patrols guarded damaged blocks, controlled movement, and watched for looting as the city tried to keep order. Le Havre, 1856. Sailing ships leave the French port in one of the early photographic views of maritime trade. The image captures a world still driven by wind power, just before steamships began changing ocean travel forever. Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, 1916. This passport photo shows a woman posing with her dog inside an official identity document. Before strict ID photo rules, some documents still allowed portraits with personal details that modern passports would reject. Arizona, 1959. Children decorate a tall saguaro cactus as a Christmas tree in the desert. The photo shows a local holiday workaround where the landscape itself replaced a traditional fir tree. Japan, 1890s. A doctor checks a woman's pulse during a medical visit in a traditional room. Pulse reading was a key diagnostic method in East Asian medicine, used to judge illness before modern tests were common. Messina, Sicily, 1908. A powerful before-dawn earthquake and sea surge reduced whole streets to rubble. The damage was so vast that Italy rebuilt the port city under new earthquake rules. Berlin, 1989. Crowds from both sides gather on the wall beside the Brandenburg Gate. A closed border became a public celebration almost overnight, marking the end of the divided city. Montgomery, Alabama, 1956. A black woman watches robed Klan members walk past her on the sidewalk. The scene shows civil rights pressure in ordinary public space, not only in marches, courts, and newspapers. Southern Russia, 1918. White Army soldiers pose around a woman during the Russian Civil War. The photo shows the anti-Bolshevik side as a mixed force of officers, recruits, local units, and refugees. Galicia, 1916. An Austro-Hungarian marksman aims a Steyr Mannlicher M.1895 from a timber trench near Brody. The shield at his feet shows how soldiers used small armor plates for brief cover above the trench line. New York, 1957. 9 teenagers stand in court after being accused in the Michael Farmer case, a mistaken identity gang attack. The case shocked the city because most suspects were still school age, turning Youth Street violence into a national debate. China, October 16, 1964. Cavalrymen rode across the desert in footage linked to the country's first successful atomic test. The scene is striking because old horse units and new atomic power appear in the same military image. Berlin, 1989. East German border guards spray water as West Berliners break pieces from the wall below. The photo captures the border losing authority in real time, with guards still present, but the barrier already becoming history. Vladivostok, July 1, 1968. Circus trainers Walter and Maritza Zapashny walk through the street with their Tiger Typhoon. The calm sidewalk scene shows how Soviet circus animals could appear in public, like living advertisements for the show. Soviet Front, 1943. Soldiers inspect Allied aid crates marked bacon, lard, and canned meat. Lend-Lease food mattered because it fed troops and factories when Soviet supply lines were under extreme strain. Nuremberg, 1946. A former Ravensbrück prisoner shows her injuries as evidence during the trials. The photo records how survivor testimony became part of the legal case against the camp system. Korea, India, 1948. Maharaja Ramanuj Pratap. Singh Deo poses after a hunt with 3 Asiatic cheetahs, often cited as the last confirmed in India. Only a few years later, the species was declared extinct in the country, turning this photo into a stark record of a lost animal population. Shanghai, 1932. A Japanese soldier uses a room with advertising posters as a hidden firing position. The contrast is sharp because a normal commercial interior had been turned into a wartime street post. Mid-1930s. A couple poses with a strange circular outdoor chair or sunshade device, likely made for leisure or photography. The image stands out because it looks almost futuristic for a family snapshot from that period. Gudauta, Abkhazia, 1993. A young woman holds an AK-74 during a funeral for a man lost in the conflict. The rifle belonged to him, turning the ceremony into both a farewell and a public sign of a divided region. Cape Canaveral, March 26, 1958. A Juno 1 rocket lifts. Explorer 3, America's second successful Explorer satellite. Its data helped confirm the Van Allen radiation belts, proving Earth is surrounded by trapped high-energy particles. Berlin, 1989. People break the wall with hammers while crowds watch from both sides. It stood for just over 28 years, but its fall became one of the clearest images of the Cold War ending. Saipan, 1944. 2 American servicemen read the notice for their Purple Hearts after being injured during the island campaign. The photo is rare because it shows black troops being formally decorated in a military still shaped by segregation. Cuba, 1960. A revolutionary leader watches as a photographer takes pictures during the Ernest Hemingway Marlin fishing contest. The fishing event became famous because politics, sport, and celebrity culture briefly met on one boat. Brazil, 1979. Indigenous protesters face soldiers during the military regime, holding a banner that calls the dictatorship criminal. The photo shows native groups openly defending land and rights under a government that tried to silence public resistance. France, 1930s. The Amiot 143 flew with a huge glass nose and boxy crew cabin that already looked outdated when it entered service. It was built for several roles at once, but its slow speed made it a strange survivor from early military aviation. Britain, December 1942. A female spotter scans the sky beside a 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun. Her job was to catch aircraft early, giving gun crews seconds to aim before the target passed overhead. New York City, 1950s. A young American politician smokes a small cigar outside photographer Howell Conant's studio. The photos are rare because they show a relaxed private image before television made presidential appearance a major political tool. Kremlin, 1999. Russia's president stands with his newly appointed prime minister and senior officials outside a Kremlin doorway. Within months, that prime minister became acting president, making this a quiet photo of a major power transfer. Georgia, 1910. Two barefoot children climb cotton mill frames to reach the upper rows of thread. Photos like this helped expose child labor and pushed Americans to demand factory reforms. New York, June 19, 1929. Dancer Ruth Morgan cools off with a garden hose during a summer heat wave. Before home air conditioning, rooftops, fire escapes, and hoses were common city escapes from brutal heat. Berlin, early 1990s. People scatter as police water cannons clear a street in the newly reunified city. The photo shows how the end of the wall did not bring instant calm, as politics, protest, and social tension still filled Berlin's streets. Write in the comments, which photo did you like the most and for what reason?